The story of Helena, the woman who found her strength in silence. Helena had always believed that life was made up of small certainties. The smell of coffee in the morning, the predictable sounds of the market around the corner, or her mother's smile every time she walked through the door. Yet by the age of 31, those certainties had begun to fade one by one, as if life had decided to remind her that nothing is ever as stable as we think. She now lived in a small apartment in the mountains of Antioquia, a quiet place, almost detached from the world, surrounded by bamboo groves that swayed with the wind. She wasn't there by choice. She had arrived searching for a pause, or perhaps running away. Since her father died unexpectedly and her nearly 10-year relationship ended in just a few days, something inside her had broken. Her mind was a constant whirlwind. And although she appeared calm on the outside, inside she wrestled with doubts and shadows she had never faced before. In that new home, she spent most days alone. There were no strange noises or unfamiliar voices. The only sounds were her breathing, the wind, and sometimes the echo of her own thoughts, repeating questions she had never wanted to answer. During her first week there, she felt something close to fear, not because of the place, but because of what it meant to stay still. Stillness forced her to listen to herself, to observe herself, to think about herself, and that was something she had always avoided. One afternoon, while cleaning the wooden dining table, the one she had inherited from her father and that still bore the marks of old coffee cups, she found a notebook she didn't remember packing. When she opened it, she recognized his clear, steady handwriting. They were reflections, small notes, loose phrases he had written during the last months of his life. Many were unfinished, others felt like thoughts released into the air. But one caught her attention because it seemed written just for her. Life will always push us toward noise, but clarity only appears when we dare to remain in silence. When she read those words, she felt a gentle but deep impact in her chest. Her father had never been a man of long speeches. He was more about simple gestures, short phrases that only made sense years later. But that sentence stayed with her for days, like a bell ringing inside her mind. By her second month in the mountains, Helena began going for walks every morning. At first, she walked without direction, almost mechanically. She walked and thought again. Soon she noticed something curious about her mind. It tried to bring up painful memories and unanswered questions, but the mountains seemed to soften them, as if the fresh air drained them of their power. That allowed her to look at her life from a gentler distance, less overwhelming. One morning, while walking along a narrow trail, she came across an older man sitting on a large rock, silently observing the valley. He had a well-kept gray beard, a dark wool poncho, and a small thermos beside him. He didn't look like a farmer, but rather someone who had chosen the mountains as a refuge. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" he said without turning away. Helena hesitated before answering. "Yes, it's special," she replied. The man smiled slightly. "I've been coming here for years." "People think you come here to think," he said, "but really you come here to stop thinking." That phrase felt strangely familiar to Helena, as if it connected with her father's note. "What do you mean, stop thinking?" she asked. "Thinking isn't the problem," he replied. "The problem is when you let your thoughts think for you. That's exhausting, isn't it?" She stayed silent. It was the first time someone had described exactly what she was experiencing. He introduced himself as Julian, and from that day on, they ran into each other from time to time. They didn't talk much, but each meeting left Helena with a sense of calm she couldn't explain. Julian spoke little, but when he did, his words felt carefully chosen. "The hardest part isn't losing things," he told her one afternoon as they watched a flock of birds. "The hardest part is accepting that many of them were never really ours." That sentence stayed with her for weeks. One night, while preparing chamomile tea, Helena felt something like calm for the first time in months. It wasn't happiness, nor sadness. It was a quiet form of acceptance. She sat on the living room floor and opened her father's notebook again. This time she found a paragraph she hadn't noticed before. It read, "Helena is strong, but she doesn't know it. She always looks for answers outside herself. I hope one day she understands that no answer is final, and that life doesn't wait for us to figure everything out before it keeps moving." She felt a lump in her throat. She didn't cry, but that deep sense of being seen passed straight through her. Her father had seen things in her that she herself had refused to see. Life in the mountains slowly became less of a pause and more a way of putting things in order. Not because everything was fine, but because she no longer needed to hide from the difficult questions. She began to write, first short phrases, then longer thoughts. Sometimes she wrote questions she didn't try to answer. Other times she noted simple things, like the color of the sky or the sound of the rain. One day, after a long walk, she found Julian sitting in his usual spot. He looked different, more tired. "I hadn't seen you in a while," she said. "Sometimes you need to step away from places where you feel too comfortable," he replied. Helena sat beside him. "I've been thinking a lot," she said. "And has it helped?" he asked. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "Sometimes I feel like I'm moving forward, other times like I'm going backward." Julian looked at the valley. "That's how every human being walks," he said. "No step is final. The mistake is believing we should feel consistent all the time. Life is made of waves, not straight lines." That phrase stayed with her. A month later, something unexpected happened. Julian stopped appearing. Helena climbed the hill several times looking for him, but never found him. She asked some neighbors in the area, but no one knew him. It was as if the man had emerged from the mountain and returned to it. That sudden absence helped her understand something. Julian hadn't entered her life by accident. His presence had been brief, intense, and deeply transformative. "Some people are in our lives only long enough to move us 1 degree, she wrote that night in her notebook. "And that single degree changes everything." The months passed, and although the sadness over her father and the breakup was still part of her, it had changed shape. It had become softer, more manageable. It no longer crushed her or dictated her days. One June evening, after a heavy rain, Helena stepped onto the balcony with a blanket over her shoulders. The sky was clear, and the air smelled of wet earth. She closed her eyes and took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel like she needed an answer for everything. She didn't feel the urge to control every part of her life. The silence that had once frightened her had now become her companion, her refuge, her teacher. As she looked at the mountains, she remembered something her father had written that she had once overlooked. Silence doesn't arrive when life is resolved. It arrives when we stop running. Helena didn't know what would come next. She didn't know if she would fall in love again, change cities, or if sadness would return someday with greater force. But she was no longer afraid of not knowing, because she had learned that life isn't about running away from pain, but about learning to walk with it without losing sight of the horizon. She took one more slow breath, feeling the air fill her chest, and in that simple breath she understood something she had never seen clearly before. We can't always choose what life takes from us, but we can always choose who we become afterward. Are you interested in Stoicism, personal growth, and life stories? Then subscribe, turn on notifications, and don't miss any of our videos. And don't forget to follow us on all our social media platforms to stay connected with our community. Join the Stoic Stories family.